Her mother loudly called me a failure at Thanksgiving. When I defended myself, my wife snapped. Don't talk back to my mother or just get out right now. I quietly nodded and left, taking the command literally. When she returned to our apartment 3 days later, she realized I had completely moved out. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The duplex on Merritt Street looked exactly like the 14 others on the block. Vinyl siding in faded beige, narrow driveways separated by chain-link fences, satellite dishes mounted at odd angles. Caleb Rourke pulled his 10-year-old Civic into the driveway and killed the engine, watching his breath fog the windshield. November in Wisconsin meant ice on the sidewalks and wind that cut through your jacket like it had a personal grudge. He sat there for a moment, keys dangling from the ignition, staring at his mother-in-law's front door. The wreath hanging there was crooked, decorated with plastic autumn leaves that had seen better years. Through the window, he could see movement, shadows passing behind thin curtains, the warm glow of too many lamps crowded into too small a space. Thanksgiving dinner. For years running now. For years of sitting at that table, measuring his words, bracing for impact. Tessa opened the passenger door and slid out without looking at him, her boots crunching on the frozen gravel. She'd been quiet the whole drive over, scrolling through her phone with that look on her face, the one that said she was already somewhere else. Already preparing. You coming? She asked, not turning around. Caleb climbed out, tucking his hands into his coat pockets. The cold bit at his ears immediately. He should have worn a hat, but Darlene Wickham had opinions about men wearing hats indoors, and the moment he stepped through that door, he'd be indoors for the next 4 hours minimum. Right behind you, he said. Tessa's shoulders tensed, just slightly. She knew what tonight would be. They both did. This wasn't about turkey or gratitude. This was about something else entirely. Something that had been building for months now, maybe years, like water freezing and expanding in a crack until the whole foundation split. The front door opened before they reached it. Darlene stood there in her apron, flour dusting her hands, her face arranged in that expression Caleb had come to know intimately. Mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on someone else, eyes calculating, measuring. She looked at Tessa first, the way she always did, as if Caleb were merely an accessory his wife had brought along. There you are, Darlene said, pulling Tessa into a hug. I was starting to worry. Traffic? No, Tessa said. Just running a little behind. Darlene's gaze slid over to Caleb then, and the warmth in her expression dimmed several degrees. Caleb. Darlene, he replied evenly. Thanks for having us. She stepped back without responding, letting them into the narrow entryway, where coats hung on hooks screwed directly into the drywall. The house smelled like roasting meat and something sweet. Probably the pumpkin pie Tessa had mentioned her mother made every year from a recipe she claimed was passed down, but Caleb suspected came straight from the back of a can. Inside, the living room was crammed with furniture that didn't quite fit. A sectional sofa pushed against one wall, a recliner angled toward a television playing the football game with the sound muted, a coffee table stacked with magazines, and a decorative bowl filled with potpourri that had stopped smelling like anything years ago. Family photos covered every available surface, and Caleb noticed, not for the first time, that he appeared in exactly none of them. There were plenty of Tessa, baby pictures, school photos, wedding shots from her first marriage that had lasted all of 8 months, but after she married Caleb, the gallery had apparently closed. Tessa's younger brother, Kyle, was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when they entered, offered a half wave, and went back to his screen. At 23, Kyle still lived in his childhood bedroom upstairs, working part-time at a warehouse and spending his evenings gaming. Darlene called it finding himself. Caleb called it avoiding reality, but he'd stopped saying that out loud. Dinner's almost ready, Darlene announced, wiping her hands on her apron. Kyle, set the table. Tessa, come help me with the gravy. And just like that, Caleb was alone in the living room. He stood there for a moment, then sat in the chair farthest from the television, the one nobody liked because the cushion was worn flat and it creaked when you shifted your weight. He could hear them in the kitchen, Voices overlapping, Darlene asking about Tessa's work at the insurance office, Tessa responding with the kind of animation she never showed at home anymore. Through the doorway, Caleb watched his wife laugh at something her mother said. When was the last time she'd laughed like that with him? When was the last time they'd had a conversation that didn't revolve around bills or schedules or whose turn it was to take out the trash? He pulled out his phone, more for something to do with his hands than any real interest in checking it. No messages, no emails that mattered. He opened the weather app, 28 degrees, dropping to 15 overnight. Lake effect, snow warning for Friday. You want a beer? Kyle asked without looking up from his own phone. Sure, Caleb said. Kyle didn't move. After a moment, Caleb stood and went to the kitchen himself. Darlene was stirring something on the stove while Tessa arranged rolls on a serving plate. They both looked up when he entered, and the conversation stopped so abruptly it left an echo. Just grabbing a drink, Caleb said, moving to the refrigerator. Darlene's mouth tightened. There's beer in the garage fridge. Don't take from the kitchen one. Those are for dinner. Caleb paused, his hand on the refrigerator handle. The kitchen fridge hummed loudly in the silence. He could see 3 six-packs visible through the glass door. He let his hand drop. Garage. Got it. He walked through the cramped kitchen, past the chipped laminate counters and the ancient microwave that Darlene refused to replace because it still worked fine, and out the back door to the detached garage. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in the unheated space. He found the mini fridge tucked between a lawnmower and stacks of cardboard boxes labeled with years, 2018, 2019, 2020, though he had no idea what Darlene was saving in them. The beer was cheap domestic stuff, ice cold. He twisted off the cap and took a long drink, standing there in the cold garage, breathing out clouds of vapor. Through the small window, he could see into the kitchen. Tessa and her mother were talking, heads close together, and he couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could read Darlene's expression well enough. She was complaining about something. Or someone. Him, probably. It was always him. Caleb took another drink and headed back inside. The dining room table was too small for 6 people, even though only 5 were eating tonight. Tessa's father had died 3 years back, heart attack at 59, gone before the ambulance arrived, and nobody had replaced his chair. It sat there at the head of the table, empty, a ghost of authority that Darlene now wielded in his absence. They crowded around the remaining chairs, elbows knocking, passing dishes in a choreographed routine that Caleb had never quite mastered. The turkey sat in the center, golden and steaming, surrounded by bowls of mashed potatoes, stuffing, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce that still had the ridges from the can. It looked like a magazine spread, except for the worn tablecloth and the mismatched plates. Darlene sat at the head, naturally. Kyle slouched to her right, already loading his plate before anyone had said grace. Tessa sat to Darlene's left, which put Caleb next to Kyle and directly across from his wife. The seating arrangement wasn't accidental. Nothing in this house was accidental. Kyle, we're saying grace first, Darlene said sharply. Kyle dropped the serving spoon back into the potatoes and folded his hands, rolling his eyes. Caleb caught the gesture and almost smiled. At least Kyle's disrespect was equal opportunity. Dear Lord, Darlene began, closing her eyes, we thank you for this food, for this family, for the blessings you've bestowed upon us. We ask that you guide us toward wisdom and strength, that you help us recognize what matters and what doesn't, and that you grant us the patience to endure life's disappointments. Amen. Amen, Tessa echoed. Kyle grabbed the potatoes. Caleb didn't say anything. He never did, not during grace. Darlene's prayers had evolved over the years in a thinly veiled commentary, little sermons directed at whoever had earned her displeasure that week. Tonight's mention of life's disappointments was about as subtle as a brick through a window. They ate in relative silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the scraping of forks against plates and the distant murmur of the football game from the living room. The food was good. Caleb had to give Darlene that much. Whatever else she could cook. So, Darlene said, setting down her fork with deliberate precision. She'd barely touched her food. Caleb, here it comes, he thought. How's work? she asked, and the question sounded exactly like what it was. The opening move in a chess game she'd already won in her head. Caleb finished chewing, took a sip of water. It's good. Same client for 8 months now. Steady work. Contracting, Darlene said, like the word tasted sour. That's what you call it. That's what it is, Caleb replied. 8 months. Darlene picked up her fork again, but didn't eat, just gestured with it. And before that, Tessa shifted in her seat. Mom, I'm just asking, Darlene said innocently. I'm interested in what my son-in-law does for a living. Is that not allowed? Caleb kept his voice level. Before that was a different contract. 6 months. Different company. And before that, another contract. Darlene nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd suspected all along. So you're jumping between jobs. That's what I'm hearing. I'm contracting, Caleb said again. It's how the industry works now. Project-based. Flexible. Flexible. Darlene repeated the word, testing it. That's an interesting way to say unstable. Kyle kept eating, head down, shoveling food into his mouth. Tessa was staring at her plate, her jaw tight. Caleb could feel the temperature in the room shifting, the air getting thinner. It's stable enough, he said. I'm working, getting paid, contributing. Darlene laughed, a short, sharp sound. Contracting isn't a career, Caleb. It's surviving. It's what people do when they can't hold down a real job. Mom, Tessa said quietly. Can we not? I'm just being honest, Darlene interrupted. Someone has to be. Your father would say the same thing if he were here. She turned her attention back to Caleb, and her voice hardened. My daughter married a man who was supposed to be stable. Someone who could provide, who could build a future. Instead, she's carrying everything while you play catch-up with temporary jobs. Caleb set his fork down carefully. His pulse was steady, his breathing controlled, but something cold was spreading through his chest. That's not true. No. Darlene leaned forward. She works full-time. She handles the bills, the house, everything. What exactly are you contributing? We both work, Caleb said, keeping his voice calm. We agreed on this arrangement. It works for us. Does it? Darlene looked at Tessa. Does it work for you, honey? Tessa's eyes came up, sharp, almost panicked. We're fine, she said. We don't need to. You're not fine, Darlene said. I see it. I'm your mother. I know when something's wrong. Caleb could feel it building now, the pressure in the room, the way the walls seemed to be closing in. He looked at Tessa, waiting for her to say something, to defend him, to tell her mother to back off. Tessa looked down at her plate. I appreciate your concern, Caleb said, turning back to Darlene, but my marriage and my career are not your business. The words hung there, flat and final. Darlene's face flushed. Excuse me. You heard me, Caleb said. He wasn't angry. He wasn't raising his voice. He was simply done. You've been criticizing me since I walked through that door. Every year, every holiday, every time you get the chance. I'm tired of it. How dare you, Darlene breathed. In my house. In your house, at your table, eating your food, Caleb said. I know, but that doesn't give you the right to insult me, to tell me I'm a failure, to act like I'm some kind of burden on your daughter. You are a burden, Darlene snapped. Look at you. No real job. No ambition. Nothing to offer except excuses. Mom. Tessa's voice cut through, sharp and sudden. But she wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking at Caleb. Why do you always do this? Caleb stared at her. Do what? This. Tessa gestured wildly. Make everything awkward. Start fights. You know how she is. Why can't you just let it go? Let it go. Caleb repeated slowly. She called me a failure. She said I'm a burden. And you want me to let it go? Tears were already forming in Tessa's eyes. That quick shift he'd seen 1,000 times. She's my mother. She's upset. You're being defensive. I'm being defensive. Caleb felt something crack inside him, something that had been holding for too long. Tessa, she just told me I have nothing to offer. She said I'm not good enough for you. And you're defending her? I'm not defending anyone, Tessa said, her voice rising. I'm trying to keep the peace. I'm trying to have one nice holiday without you turning it into a drama. Darlene sat back, arms crossed, watching. Kyle had stopped eating entirely, his eyes darting between them like he was watching a tennis match. Caleb stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the floor, loud in the sudden silence. "Sit down," Tessa said. "Please, just let's finish dinner." "No," Caleb said. "Caleb, she disrespected me. You defended her. I'm not sitting here and pretending that's okay." Tessa's face crumpled. "You're making this so much worse. Just apologize and sit down." "Apologize?" Caleb's laugh was hollow. "For what? For defending myself? For starting a fight," Tessa said. "For disrespecting my mother in her own home." "I didn't start this," Caleb said, "but I'm finishing it." He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. His hands weren't shaking. His voice wasn't breaking. He felt eerily calm, like he was watching himself from a distance. "Where are you going?" Tessa asked, standing now too. "Home," Caleb said. "You can't just leave." "Yes," he said, looking at her directly. "I can." Tessa's expression shifted then, tears drying almost instantly, replaced by something harder. "If you walk out that door, Caleb." He waited. "Don't come back," she finished. The words landed in the space between them, heavy and irreversible. Caleb nodded once. "Okay." He walked out. Behind him, he heard Darlene's voice. "Let him go, honey. You're better off." He didn't look back. The drive home took 17 minutes. Caleb kept the radio off, the heater blasting against the cold, his hands steady on the wheel. The streets were empty. Most families still gathered around their tables, digesting turkey and forced gratitude. The house he shared with Tessa was dark when he pulled into the driveway. Their side of the duplex, the left half, distinguished only by the slightly newer mailbox he'd installed last spring. He sat in the car for a moment, engine idling, staring at the darkened windows. For years of marriage, 6 years together total, and it had come down to this, sitting in a cold car outside a dark house, choosing between his dignity and his wife, and finding out there was no choice at all. She'd already made it for him. Inside, the house was cold. He turned the thermostat down before they left to save money. Another thing Tessa criticized, another way he supposedly failed to provide. He flipped on lights as he moved through the rooms, each one revealing the life they'd built. Furniture they'd picked out together. Pictures on the walls. Wedding photo on the mantle, both of them smiling, her in white, him in a rented tux that didn't quite fit. That man in the photo looked happy, naive, like he thought love would be enough. Caleb went to the bedroom and pulled a duffel bag from the closet. He moved methodically, packing clothes, toiletries, his laptop, and charger. He took only what was unquestionably his. Nothing they'd bought together, nothing that could be disputed. His side of the closet was easier to empty than he'd expected. Most of his stuff was old, worn, things he'd had for years before Tessa came into his life. He was nearly finished when he heard the front door open. Tessa's footsteps in the hall. Quick, purposeful. She appeared in the doorway, face flushed from cold or crying or both. "What are you doing?" Caleb zipped the duffel bag. "Packing." "No." Tessa shook her head. "No, you're not leaving. You're being dramatic." "You told me not to come back," Caleb said. "I'm respecting your wishes." "I didn't mean—" She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. "I was upset. You embarrassed me in front of my family." "I defended myself," Caleb said. "There's a difference. You attacked my mother." "No." Caleb shouldered the duffel bag. "I set a boundary. Your mother attacked me. For years now, and you've never once stood up for me." "That's not true," Tessa said, but her voice wavered. "Name one time," Caleb said. "One time you told her to stop. One time you defended me." Tessa's mouth opened, closed. She looked away. "That's what I thought," Caleb said. "Why are you doing this?" Tessa's voice climbed higher, taking on that edge that signaled tears were coming. "I'm stuck between you and my family. Do you know how hard that is for me?" "Yeah," Caleb said quietly. "I do, which is why I'm leaving." "So you're giving up?" Tears were flowing now, her mascara running. "You're just abandoning me?" "You told me to leave," Caleb reminded her. "You chose your mother over me. You made your position clear." "I was angry," Tessa shouted. "People say things when they're angry. You know I didn't mean it." Caleb set the bag down and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he'd married. The woman he'd thought he'd grow old with. And he saw what he'd been refusing to see for months, maybe longer. She wasn't crying because she loved him. She was crying because she was losing control, because the script had changed and she didn't know her lines anymore. "Did you mean it when you said I disrespected your mother?" he asked. "When you told me to apologize?" Tessa wiped her face. "Yes, you did disrespect her." "There it is," Caleb said. "There what is?" "The truth." He picked up the bag again. "You're not upset that I'm leaving, Tessa. You're upset that I'm not accepting the blame for this. You're upset that for once, I'm not the one apologizing." "You're twisting my words," she said desperately. "You're making me sound like the bad guy." "I'm not making you sound like anything," Caleb said. "I'm just listening to what you're actually saying." He moved toward the door. Tessa blocked his path, hands raised. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't go. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Can you tell your mother she was wrong?" Caleb asked. Tessa froze. "Can you tell her that what she said was cruel and unacceptable? That she needs to apologize to me?" "She's my mother," Tessa said weakly. "That's not an answer," Caleb said. "That's an excuse." He stepped around her, and this time she didn't try to stop him. He walked through the house, past the living room where they'd watched movies, past the kitchen where they'd cooked together in better days, out the front door into the cold November night. Behind him, he heard Tessa sobbing, loud, theatrical, the kind of crying designed to make him turn around. He kept walking. He threw his bag in the trunk, climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. Tessa appeared on the front porch, silhouetted in the doorway light, arms wrapped around herself. Caleb put the car in reverse. She didn't move. He backed out of the driveway, shifted into drive, and left. In his rearview mirror, he watched her standing there, getting smaller and smaller, until she disappeared entirely. He drove to a hotel off Highway 41, checked into a room with beige walls and a television bolted to the dresser. He sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by silence, and waited to feel something: regret, doubt, grief. Nothing came, just a strange, quiet peace, like he'd finally exhaled after holding his breath for years. He woke up early in the hotel room. The alarm on his phone cutting through the dark at 6 a.m. Thin light filtered through the gaps in the curtains, illuminating the generic landscape, painting bolted to the wall, the industrial carpet with its abstract pattern designed to hide stains. Caleb lay there for a moment, staring at the popcorn ceiling, listening to someone moving around in the room above him. His phone buzzed. Multiple times. Messages flooding in. He picked it up, squinting at the screen in the dim light. 17 text messages. All from Tessa, sent between midnight and 3 in the morning. "Where are you? Caleb, please answer me. You can't just disappear like this. I'm worried. Are you safe? This isn't funny. You're scaring me. My mom is asking if you're okay. Please just come home so we could talk. I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? You're being cruel. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Fine. Don't answer. I get it now. You never loved me anyway." The last few messages were from this morning. "We need to talk about bills. The mortgage is due next week. You need to come get your stuff." Caleb read through them all once, then set the phone face down on the nightstand. He got up, showered in the small bathroom where the water pressure was too strong and the temperature swung wildly between scalding and freezing. He dressed in the same clothes he'd worn yesterday, checked out at the front desk, and drove to a diner he knew on the west side of town. The place was half empty, the morning rush not yet started. He ordered coffee and eggs, sat in a booth by the window, and opened his laptop. He had work to do, deadlines that wouldn't care about his personal drama. The contract he was on was with a manufacturing company based out of Milwaukee, updating their inventory management system. Boring work. Steady work. Enough to pay his half of the bills. His phone buzzed again. "Tessa, don't ignore me. This is childish. Just tell me where you are." He silenced the phone and focused on the code in front of him, losing himself in the clean logic of if statements and loops, problems with clear solutions, bugs that could be fixed with patience and attention. By noon, he put in 5 hours of work and finished the module he'd been stuck on. He closed the laptop, paid his bill, and drove to the apartment complex where his friend Mike lived. They'd worked together at his last job, stayed in touch after Caleb had moved on. Mike answered the door in sweatpants and a Green Bay Packers jersey, hair sticking up in every direction. "Dude," Mike said, taking in Caleb's appearance, wrinkled clothes, duffel bag, the look of someone who'd slept in a hotel. What happened? Can I crash on your couch for a bit? Caleb asked. Mike stepped back without hesitation. Yeah, man. Of course. Come in. The apartment was a typical bachelor setup. Gaming system hooked up to a massive TV, pizza boxes on the counter, laundry in various states of clean and dirty distributed across available surfaces. But it was warm and non-judgmental and exactly what Caleb needed. Tessa, Mike asked, grabbing 2 beers from the fridge. Tessa, Caleb confirmed. He told Mike the story while they drank cheap beer on the couch, the Packers game playing in the background. Mike listened without interrupting, nodding in the right places, his expression darkening when Caleb described the dinner at Darlene's. Man, I never liked her, Mike said when Caleb finished. Your mother-in-law, I mean, met her at your wedding. She spent the whole reception criticizing the venue. Yeah, well, Caleb took a long drink. It doesn't matter now. You filing? Mike asked. Probably, Caleb said. I don't see how we come back from this. Good, Mike said. Honestly, bro, you've been miserable for like a year. I was wondering when you'd hit your limit. Caleb looked at him. Was it that obvious? To anyone paying attention, Mike said, you stop talking about her, you know? Like it all. When someone asks how she is, you change the subject. That's not a good sign. Caleb nodded slowly. He hadn't realized it, but Mike was right. Somewhere along the way, Tessa had stopped being someone he wanted to talk about. She'd become an obligation, a source of stress, a problem to manage rather than a partner to share life with. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, Tessa's name on the screen, and silenced it without reading. Let her sweat, Mike said. You need space to think. Space to think turned out to be exactly what Caleb needed. He spent 3 days on Mike's couch, working during the day, avoiding his phone, sleeping more soundly than he had in months. On the 4th day, he drove to a storage facility and rented a unit, then went back to the house when he knew Tessa would be at work. The house felt different in her absence, colder, emptier, like a stage set after the actors had left. He moved quickly, efficiently, taking only what was unquestionably his. His tools from the garage, his books, his winter coat from the hall closet, the coffee maker he'd brought into the marriage. He left everything they'd bought together. Furniture, decorations, kitchen supplies. Let her keep it. Let her figure out. He was loading boxes into his car when his phone rang. Not Tessa this time. Darlene. He almost didn't answer. His thumb hovered over the decline button. Then, curious what she could possibly have to say, he accepted the call. Hello. You need to stop this, Darlene said without preamble. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. What you're doing to my daughter is cruel. Caleb set down the box he was holding. I'm not doing anything to her. You abandoned her, Darlene said. You walked out on Thanksgiving and haven't been home since. She's devastated. She told me to leave, Caleb said. Multiple times. She was upset, Darlene snapped. She didn't mean it. Anyone could see that. I couldn't, Caleb said. Because you wanted an excuse, Darlene said. You've been looking for a way out for months. Don't pretend this is about Thanksgiving. You're a quitter, Caleb. You quit jobs, you quit commitments, and now you're quitting your marriage. Caleb felt that same cold calm settling over him. Are you done? Excuse me. Are you done? He repeated. Because I have things to do, and listening to you insult me isn't one of them. How dare you? How dare I? Caleb cut her off. Let's talk about that. How dare I stand up for myself? How dare I refuse to be disrespected in front of my wife? How dare I expect my wife to defend me instead of joining in when her mother calls me a failure? I never. You did, Caleb said. At your table, in front of everyone. You said I was unstable, that I had nothing to offer, that Tessa was carrying me. And when I defended myself, she told me to leave. Silence on the other end of the line. You raised her to put you first, Caleb continued. To prioritize your feelings over anyone else's. And that's worked out really well for you, hasn't it? You get to control her life, make all the decisions, and anyone who disagrees with you is the problem. That's not true, Darlene said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. It is true, Caleb said. And the worst part is Tessa knows it. Deep down, she knows what you're doing. But she's too afraid to stand up to you. She doesn't need to stand up to me, Darlene said. I'm her mother. I'm on her side. No, Caleb said quietly. You're on your own side. You always have been. He ended the call. His hands were steady. His pulse was calm. He loaded the rest of his boxes into the car, locked up the house, and drove away without looking back. The narrative spread quickly, the way stories do in small communities where everyone knows everyone's business. Caleb heard about it from Mike first, who heard it from someone at the gym, who heard it from someone who worked with Tessa's cousin. According to the story making the rounds, Caleb had lost his temper at Thanksgiving dinner. He'd yelled at Darlene, called her names, made Tessa cry, and stormed out without explanation. He'd been unstable for months, apparently. Unreliable. Tessa had been covering for him, trying to make the marriage work, but he'd finally shown his true colors. She was blindsided, devastated, a victim of his volatility. None of it was true, but truth had never been the point. She's spinning it, Mike said, showing Caleb a Facebook post Tessa had shared. It was a quote, some generic inspirational garbage about being strong during difficult times, but the comments underneath were telling. Friends offering support, calling Caleb every name they could think of, promising to be there for Tessa during her ordeal. Caleb read through them dispassionately. Anger would have been useless. These people didn't know him. They only knew Tessa's version of events, carefully curated to cast her as the wounded party. You gonna defend yourself? Mike asked. No, Caleb said. Why not? Because the people who believe her don't matter to me, Caleb said. And the people who matter already know the truth. It was a small list, that second group. Mike, a couple of other friends from work, his brother in Montana, who Caleb had called to explain what happened before the story reached him through other channels. Everyone else could believe what they wanted. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Tessa texted him asking to meet. Not demanding. Asking. That alone told Caleb something had shifted. They met at a diner off Highway 151, far enough from town that they wouldn't run into anyone they knew. Caleb arrived first, ordered coffee, and sat in a booth facing the door. Tessa arrived 10 minutes late, bundled in a heavy coat, her face drawn and tired. She looked smaller somehow, older, like the stress was aging her in real time. She slid into the booth across from him without greeting, ordered coffee when the waitress came by, and sat in silence until the woman left. You look good, Tessa said finally, and there was resentment in it. Accusation. I'm managing, Caleb said. Where are you staying? With a friend. Mike. Does it matter? Tessa wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, even though it was too hot to drink. I guess not. Silence stretched between them. Caleb waited. She'd asked for this meeting. She could explain why. I don't understand, Tessa said finally. How you could just leave like that. How you could walk away from everything we built. I didn't walk away, Caleb said. You pushed me out. I was upset, Tessa said. You know I didn't mean it. You know I wanted you to come back. When? Caleb asked. When did you want me to come back? Was it when you told me not to? Or when you told everyone I abandoned you? Or when you let your mother call me to tell me I was a quitter? Tessa's face flushed. She shouldn't have done that. But she did, Caleb said. With your permission, I assume. I didn't ask her to call you, Tessa said defensively. But she's my mother. She was worried about me. Right, Caleb said. About you. Tessa's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? It means this was never about us, Caleb said. This was about you. About how you felt. About how I made you look. About keeping the peace with your mother, no matter what it cost me. That's not fair, Tessa said. You're making me sound selfish. I'm making you sound honest, Caleb corrected. For once, tears welled up in Tessa's eyes, that familiar defense mechanism, that way of shifting the emotional terrain to make him the aggressor. But Caleb didn't flinch this time. He didn't apologize. He just sat there, waiting for her to realize it wasn't going to work anymore. I'm the victim here, Tessa said, her voice breaking. You broke our family. You left me alone to deal with everything. The bills, the house, the explanations to everyone who asks where you are. Do you know how humiliating this is? You made it humiliating, Caleb said, by lying about what happened. I didn't lie, Tessa shot back. You did leave. You did walk out. After you told me to, Caleb reminded her. Multiple times. In front of your mother. That's not abandonment. That's listening. Tessa shook her head violently. You're twisting it. You're making it sound like I wanted this. Didn't you? Caleb leaned forward slightly. Be honest, Tessa. When was the last time you were happy with me? When was the last time you looked at me and thought, I'm glad he's here? She didn't answer. That's what I thought, Caleb said. This marriage ended a long time ago. Thanksgiving just made it official. So what now? Tessa asked, wiping her eyes. You're just giving up? You're not even going to try to fix this? There's nothing to fix, Caleb said. You chose your mother over me. You always have. That's not something that can be fixed with counseling or apologies or time. That's who you are. You don't know who I am, Tessa said angrily. I know exactly who you are, Caleb said. You're someone who needs to be the victim, who needs to be right, who needs everyone to think you're the good person in every situation. And I'm tired of being the villain in your story. You're being cruel, Tessa whispered. I'm being truthful, Caleb said, and you're not used to that. He stood up, leaving money on the table for both their coffees. I'll be filing for divorce, he said. You can expect the papers in a few weeks. Tessa looked up at him, mascara running. You're really doing this? You did this, Caleb said. I'm just making it official. He left her sitting there, crying into her coffee, and drove back to Mike's apartment feeling lighter than he had in years. The reality of being alone hit Tessa faster than Caleb had expected. Within a month, the cracks started showing. Mike kept him updated, not because Caleb asked, but because Mike found the whole thing darkly entertaining. Tessa had started posting on Facebook more frequently, vague complaints about bills, about stress, about how hard it was being alone. The comments were sympathetic at first, but as the posts continued, the support started drying up. People had their own problems. Compassion fatigue set in. She'd gone back to work at the insurance office, but without Caleb's income covering half the expenses, the math wasn't working out. The mortgage was higher than she remembered. The utilities were more expensive in winter. The car needed work she couldn't afford. Darlene offered advice, lots of advice, but no money. Never money. Just suggestions about budgeting, about cutting back, about finding a second job. Helpful observations about how Tessa wouldn't be in this situation if she'd married someone more reliable. The irony wasn't lost on Caleb. He, meanwhile, was thriving in ways he hadn't expected. Living on Mike's couch forced him to simplify his life. He had less stuff, fewer obligations, more mental space. His work improved. He picked up additional contracts, built new client relationships, started making more money than he had in the marriage because he wasn't constantly defending his career choices or second-guessing every decision. He slept better, ate better, started going to the gym with Mike, lost the weight he'd gained from stress eating during the last year of the marriage. And he didn't miss her. Not once. Not even a little. That, more than anything, told him he'd made the right choice. Filing for divorce was simpler than Caleb expected. He hired a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chun who came recommended by Mike's cousin. She was efficient, professional, and unbothered by emotional drama. No kids, Patricia asked during their first meeting, flipping through the financial documents Caleb had brought. No, Caleb said. No shared assets besides the house. Nothing significant. Bank accounts joint, but it's mostly empty. Cars are in our individual names. I took what was mine when I moved out. Patricia nodded, making notes. And she agrees to the divorce? I haven't told her I'm filing yet, Caleb admitted. But she knows it's coming. I told her as much. Okay. Patricia set down her pen and looked at him directly. Here's what's going to happen. We file. She gets served. She has 30 days to respond. If she contests, we go to mediation. If she doesn't, it's straightforward. Wisconsin is a no-fault state, which means we don't need to prove wrongdoing. We just need to show the marriage is irretrievably broken. It is, Caleb said. Good, Patricia said. Then let's make this as clean as possible. The papers were served on a Thursday afternoon. Caleb knew because Tessa called him immediately, her voice high and panicked. What is this? She demanded. Divorce papers? You're really doing this? I told you I would, Caleb said calmly. I thought you were bluffing, Tessa said. I thought you'd cool off and we'd work it out. There's nothing to work out, Caleb said. You can't just give up on us, Tessa said. We're married. We made vows. Vows work both ways, Caleb said. You broke yours a long time ago. I never cheated, Tessa said. I never lied to you. You chose your mother over me, Caleb said. Every single time. That's its own kind of betrayal. She's my mother, Tessa said desperately. What was I supposed to do? Support me, Caleb said. Respect me. Stand up for me when she tore me down. That's what you were supposed to do. I tried, Tessa said, but it sounded weak even to her. No, Caleb said. You didn't. And now we're here. Please, Tessa said, and now she was crying. Please don't do this. I'll talk to my mom. I'll tell her to back off. We can fix this. It's too late, Caleb said. I'm done. He hung up before she could respond. The courthouse in Fond du Lac was an old building, all stone and wood, with high ceilings that made voices echo. Caleb arrived early, dressed in the only suit he owned, a navy blue number he'd bought for a job interview 3 years ago. Patricia met him in the lobby, looking sharp in a charcoal gray pantsuit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Caleb's car. You ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, Caleb said. They walked through the metal detector, up the stairs to the 3rd floor, down a hall lined with courtrooms and offices. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in room 304, Judge Margaret Brennan presiding. Patricia had explained the process already. This was just the initial hearing, mostly procedural. They'd present the case, Tessa would have a chance to respond, and the judge would set a timeline for resolution. Tessa was already there when they entered, sitting on a bench outside the courtroom with her own lawyer, a middle-aged man in a brown suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tessa looked up when Caleb approached, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She'd been crying, probably for days. The woman next to her, Darlene, of course, had an arm around her shoulders, glaring daggers at Caleb. You look happy, Darlene said loudly as Caleb passed. Proud of yourself? Patricia touched Caleb's elbow. Ignore her, she murmured. They sat on the opposite bench and waited. The minutes crawled by. Other people came and went, other cases, other dramas, other lives falling apart in increments. At 9:55, a bailiff opened the courtroom doors and called their case. Rourke versus Rourke. They filed in, Caleb and Patricia on one side, Tessa and her lawyer on the other. Darlene tried to follow, but the bailiff stopped her. Family only, he said. I am family, Darlene protested. Immediate family involved in the case. The bailiff clarified. You'll have to wait outside. Darlene looked like she might argue, but Tessa touched her arm and shook her head. Reluctantly, Darlene retreated to the hallway, and the doors closed behind her. The courtroom was smaller than Caleb expected, wood paneling, fluorescent lights, American flag in the corner. Judge Brennan sat at the bench, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, pulled into a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as they entered, expression neutral. Please be seated, she said. They sat. Judge Brennan shuffled through papers on her desk, reading quickly. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the heating system and the faint sound of traffic outside. All right, the judge said finally, looking up. I've reviewed the petition for divorce filed by Mr. Rourke. Mrs. Rourke, you've been served, correct? Tessa's lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. And you're contesting the divorce? We're requesting time to explore reconciliation, the lawyer said. My client believes the marriage can be saved with counseling. Patricia stood. Your Honor, my client has made it clear that the marriage is irretrievably broken. He's attempted to resolve issues privately, but Mrs. Rourke has consistently prioritized her family of origin over the marriage. Further attempts at reconciliation would be futile. That's not true. Tessa spoke up suddenly, her voice cracking. He's lying. He just walked out on me without warning. I didn't know anything was wrong until he left. Judge Brennan looked at Tessa over her reading glasses. Mrs. Rourke, please allow your attorney to speak on your behalf. Tessa's lawyer touched her arm, and she subsided, but her eyes were locked on Caleb, pleading. Your Honor, Patricia continued, Mr. Rourke can provide extensive documentation showing repeated attempts to address marital issues, including text messages from the night in question where Mrs. Rourke explicitly told him to leave and not return. She handed a folder to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge. Judge Brennan opened it, began reading. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, a slight straightening, a narrowing of focus. "These are text messages from Mrs. Rourke?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said. "Sent the night of November 28th. The judge read in silence. Caleb could see Tessa from the corner of his eye, her face pale, her hands twisting in her lap. She knew what was in those messages. She'd sent them. "Mrs. Rourke," Judge Brennan said, looking up, "did you send these messages?" Tessa's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor," my client was emotional. "I asked Mrs. Rourke," the judge interrupted. "Did you send these messages telling your husband to leave and not return?" Tessa's voice came out small. "Yes, but—" "And did Mr. Rourke leave as you instructed?" "Yes, but I didn't mean—" "Thank you," Judge Brennan said, cutting her off. She closed the folder and set it aside. "Based on this documentation, I'm satisfied that the marriage is irretrievably broken. Mr. Rourke's petition for divorce is granted. We'll schedule mediation for division of assets. No further reconciliation attempts are required." "Your Honor," Tessa's lawyer tried again, "my client requests." "Your client explicitly told her husband to leave," Judge Brennan said. "He complied. This is the consequence of that decision. Petition granted. Next case." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over in less than 15 minutes. Outside the courtroom, Darlene was waiting, pacing the hallway like a caged animal. She rushed over the moment they emerged, grabbing Tessa's arm. "What happened? What did the judge say?" Tessa was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. "He granted it. The divorce. It's happening." "What?" Darlene's head snapped toward Caleb, who was standing a few feet away with Patricia, discussing next steps. "You can't let him do this." "It's done," Tessa's lawyer said wearily. The judge saw the text messages. "There's no grounds for contest." "What text messages?" Darlene demanded. Tessa didn't answer. She just kept crying, shoulders shaking. Caleb and Patricia headed for the stairs. As they passed, Darlene stepped into their path. "This is your fault," she hissed at Caleb. "You destroyed her. You destroyed this family." Caleb met her eyes calmly. "No, Darlene. You did that all on your own. How dare you? You trained your daughter to put you first," Caleb said. "To prioritize your feelings over everyone else's. To choose you over her own marriage. And when that finally caught up with her, when her husband actually left instead of just taking it, you want to blame me?" He shook his head. "I'm not the problem here. I never was." Darlene's face flushed dark red. "You're a coward. A failure. Exactly what I always said you were." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but I'm free. Can Tessa say the same?" He walked away, leaving Darlene sputtering behind him. In the parking lot, Patricia smiled grimly. "That felt good, didn't it?" "A little," Caleb admitted. "Good," Patricia said. "Now let's finish this. Mediation next week. We'll get the assets sorted, and you can move on with your life." "What about her?" Caleb asked, glancing back at the courthouse. Through the glass doors, he could see Tessa and Darlene still arguing in the hallway. "She'll figure it out," Patricia said. "Or she won't. Either way, it's not your problem anymore." Mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a neutral office downtown. The mediator was a soft-spoken woman named Ellen who specialized in family law. She sat them down in a conference room, Caleb and Patricia on one side of the table, Tessa and her lawyer on the other, and went through the assets point by point. The house was the main issue. Tessa wanted to keep it. Caleb didn't care either way, but he wanted his equity out. "I can't buy you out," Tessa said. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then sell the house," Caleb said simply. "Split the proceeds. Where am I supposed to live?" Tessa asked, her voice rising. "That's not my problem," Caleb said. "You're being vindictive," Tessa accused. "You're trying to punish me." "I'm being practical," Caleb corrected. "We both own the house. We both deserve our share. If you can't afford to buy me out, we sell. It's that simple." Tessa's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to her. She shook her head vehemently, then turned back to Caleb. "What if I refinance?" she asked. "Get a loan to pay your half." "Can you qualify for that?" Patricia asked. Tessa hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe." "Well, find out," Patricia said. "But until then, the recommendation stands. Sell the house, split the proceeds. It's the cleanest solution." The mediation lasted 3 hours. They went through everything. The joint bank account, Caleb had already withdrawn his half. The cars, no dispute, each kept their own. The furniture, Caleb had taken what he wanted, told Tessa to keep the rest. The only real sticking point was the house, and eventually, Tessa agreed to put it on the market. Fine, she said, her voice hollow. Sell it. I'll move. Where will you go? Ellen the mediator asked gently. Tessa didn't answer for a long moment. Then, quietly, my mom's, I guess. Caleb felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just a distant observation that this was the inevitable conclusion. Tessa had spent her marriage prioritizing her mother. Now she'd spend her divorce living with her. Poetic in a way. The house sold faster than expected. The market was hot, even in winter. A young couple with a baby put in an offer 2 days after it listed, and within a month, the sale was finalized. Caleb got his check, $48,000, his half of the equity, and deposited it the same day. He used part of it to rent a small apartment on the north side of town, a 1-bedroom with decent heating and a parking space. Nothing fancy, but it was his. No shared walls with Tessa. No mother-in-law dropping by unannounced. No walking on eggshells. He bought furniture from IKEA, assembled it himself in the living room while listening to a podcast about the history of jazz. He hung pictures he actually liked, landscapes, abstract art, nothing from the marriage. He set up his workspace in the corner, bought a better desk chair, invested in a second monitor for work. And slowly, methodically, he built a life that belonged entirely to him. Tessa moved back in with Darlene the same week the house sold. Caleb heard about it from Mike, who'd heard it from someone at the gym. The arrangement wasn't going well. Darlene still treated Tessa like she was 16, setting rules about curfews and chores, criticizing her choices, micromanaging her schedule. Classic, Mike said, shaking his head. She spent her whole marriage running home to mommy, and now she's stuck there. Karma, Caleb said simply. Cold, Mike observed, but fair. The final divorce decree came through on a gray afternoon in March. Caleb picked up the mail on his way home from work, saw the official envelope, opened it standing in his apartment doorway. Decree of divorce. State of Wisconsin. Rourke versus Rourke. Marriage dissolved. Assets divided. No further obligations. He read through it once, then sat on the kitchen counter and made himself dinner. Chicken stir-fry with vegetables, rice, a beer from the 6-pack in the fridge. He ate in front of the TV, watching a documentary about deep-sea exploration, and didn't think about Tessa at all. His phone rang later that evening. He glanced at the screen, saw Darlene's number, and let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, the voicemail notification appeared. He deleted it without listening. Whatever she had to say, he didn't need to hear it. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting in patches, revealing dead grass and last year's leaves. Caleb settled into routines. Work, gym, cooking meals he actually enjoyed. Reading books he'd meant to get to for years. Dating occasionally, nothing serious, just testing the waters. One Saturday, in April, he ran into Tessa at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, picking through apples, and she looked tired. Older. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing sweatpants and a coat that looked like it belonged to someone else. Their eyes met across the display of lettuce. She froze, an apple in her hand. Caleb nodded once, a simple acknowledgement, and kept walking. He didn't owe her a conversation, didn't owe her closure or kindness or anything at all. Behind him, he heard her voice, small and uncertain. Caleb. He didn't stop. Summer came, and with it, a sense of possibility. Caleb took a week off work and drove up to Montana to visit his brother. They spent days hiking in the mountains, fishing in cold streams, sitting around campfires talking about nothing important. His brother didn't ask about the divorce, didn't press for details, just welcomed him, gave him space, let him be. You seem good, his brother said on the last night, passing Caleb another beer across the fire pit. I am, Caleb said, and he meant it. Better than before, his brother observed. Way better, Caleb confirmed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching sparks rise into the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The air smelled like pine and smoke and freedom. A year after the divorce, Caleb got a friend request on Facebook from someone named Ashley, a friend of Tessa's he vaguely remembered from the wedding. He almost deleted it, but curiosity won out. He accepted. Immediately, a message popped up. "Hey, I know this is random, but I wanted to reach out. I heard what really happened with you and Tessa. The real story, I mean, not her version." Caleb stared at the message. "Who told you?" "Kyle, her brother. We've been dating for a few months. He said she lied about everything. Said you had every right to leave." Caleb leaned back in his chair. Kyle. He'd barely thought about Tessa's brother since the divorce. The kid who'd sat there at Thanksgiving dinner, silent, watching the whole thing unfold. "That's good to hear," Caleb typed back. "But I don't need vindication. I know what happened. I know. I just wanted you to know that not everyone believed her. Some of us figured it out." "Thanks," Caleb wrote. "How's she doing?" There was a long pause before Ashley responded. "Not great. Still living with her mom. They fight constantly. She's gained weight, stopped taking care of herself. Darlene controls everything. Her schedule, her money, who she can see. It's bad." "That's unfortunate," Caleb typed. And he meant it in an abstract way. He didn't wish Tessa ill. He just didn't care anymore. "Kyle says she asks about you sometimes," Ashley added. "Wonders how you're doing." "I'm doing fine," Caleb wrote. "Living my life. Moving forward." "Good for you," Ashley responded. "You deserve better than what she gave you." "Thanks," Caleb said. "Take care of Kyle. He's a good kid." He closed the message thread and returned to what he'd been doing, researching apartments in Madison. His current contract was ending, and he'd been offered a position with a tech company there. Better pay, better benefits, a fresh start in a new city. He accepted the offer the next day. Fall returned, and with it, the anniversary of that Thanksgiving dinner. Caleb thought about it briefly as he drove through Madison, looking at apartments, imagining his new life. 1 year since he'd walked out of Darlene's house. 1 year since he'd chosen himself over the expectations of people who didn't respect him. Best decision he'd ever made. He found an apartment near the Capitol, a renovated building with exposed brick and high windows, space for a real office, a kitchen where he could cook without being criticized. He signed a lease that afternoon. On Thanksgiving Day, he cooked for himself. A small turkey breast, mashed potatoes, green beans, pumpkin pie from the bakery down the street. He invited Mike and a few other friends over, and they ate in his new dining room, laughing and telling stories. No tension, no judgment. No one called him a failure. No one questioned his choices. No one told him he wasn't good enough. And when the evening ended, when his friends left and Caleb cleaned up the dishes and sat on his couch in the quiet apartment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Complete, unshakable peace. He never saw Tessa again. Never spoke to Darlene. Never looked back at the life he'd left behind. He'd been given a choice. Stay small, stay silent, stay diminished, or walk away and build something better. He chose better, and he never regretted it. Not once. Not ever.